This week saw the first Senate ethics panel convened since CUNA Republican Jack Noble was investigated in 2005 for pitching a bill that seemed to directly help his convenience store business. He stepped down before that committee could make a recommendation. In this case, Senate Resources and Environment Chairman Monty Pierce waited until the very last vote on a slate of oil and gas bills to announce publicly that he had oil and gas leases on his own land, including, it came out, a partnership signed in November with one of the companies working so hard to pass this bunch of bills. In the end, though, the 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans dismissed the allegations after 3 days of hearings.
We have some general allegations, and if we're to do our job appropriately, we need to know specifically what those allegations are.
Well, unfortunately, in our view, in this case, the good senator found himself in a conflict. He had obligations to his district and the people of Idaho, and he made a decision, which was to vote more than once, and on those votes, he did not reveal his conflict.
But I point out to you that Senator Pierce disclosed to the body on the floor before the vote. And I think, candidly, that's all that Rule 39 requires. That definition, as we've discussed, doesn't just simply involve any perception of a conflict. Perhaps it should, but it doesn't.
But the good senator himself has said, this is just a witch hunt and nothing but politics. Even yesterday, he approached me in the parking lot and said this is just a political game. This is not a political game. This is dead serious.
Mr. Chairman, I have found nothing here relative to our rules that lead me to do anything except move that we dismiss these charges.
Mr. Chairman, I will support the motion. I don't believe that we have uncovered evidence that there has been a direct conflict of interest within a very narrow reading within a very narrow law.
The question of conflicts of interest in a citizen's legislature is a complicated one. Everyone there has personal interests, and in a way that's the point. They're supposed to be real people with real jobs and real experiences. There's a reason that even when a lawmaker declares a conflict, he or she is expected to go ahead and vote. They still have to represent their districts, but they're doing so in the cold light of day. And their fellow lawmakers and the voters back home can judge how they're weighing their public responsibility with their personal interests. To help really tell how the Idaho legislature works, we tracked down a couple of former lawmakers who weighed their own business needs with the needs of the state.
I was just in one term.
I was in for 6 years, from 96 to 2002.
There were real challenges with leaving your business. When you leave your business, regardless what you say, I had great managers, I had a great management team and all of that, but it's certainly when you're not there, it doesn't run the same.
Lucky for me is winter time is our slow season, so I had a little bit like some of the ag guys, so my pressure was off somewhat. But yeah, I mean, we're trying to make a living.
And when you're in the legislature, you're there. My commitment level to the legislature is that I would leave Sunday evening, then I would get up first thing in the morning and go all week and generally come home late Friday night and do that routine. And as the session got deeper and deeper, those mornings got earlier, and the nights got later, and so I didn't have a lot of time to work with my business. I felt that the little pittance we got as far as the pay up there was very little compared to what I probably lost.
And frankly, you have to work to keep your eye on the ball because self-interest is a powerful motivation. And so if you're not very, very careful, it's very easy to be a little bit unchecked and not recognize that thing that you're looking at, you may have a bias in it. And you've got to step back sometimes and do a check. We do that in everything we do. Sometimes it's our spouse that helps us stay in touch. Sometimes it's a constituent that helps us stay balanced. But there's some gut checks, that everyone's got to do.
The majority of the people that I served with were really genuine, For the most part, they were honest. Did some of them get the big head and think that they were bigger than they were? Absolutely. But I think that's in every business. It's in everything that you do.
In some way, it's like being an attorney and making sure you're representing your client first, not yourself. It's not that hard to do, but you definitely want to make sure that you're doing it.
I must say honestly, I didn't see any of them doing it for the money. Because if they did, they were destitute. Because what we do in this state it's truly a citizens' legislature that way.
You get people from all sectors, all over the place. And so while my background informed me towards the issues that I was looking at, I would rely on others.
We had people from agriculture. We had people there from the business community. We had attorneys. We had a spectrum. We had males. We had females.
And not that, whatever they say goes, but certainly they have a lot to contribute to the dialogue. And this is someone you work with, and you can judge the value of their advice, but generally it's pretty straight, good advice.
Certainly somebody from northern Idaho really didn't care about water rights. And so having someone from the perspective of the Magic Valley, basically on the Snake River Aquifer, brings a whole different perspective to that. But then if you want to talk about tribal rights, somebody from northern Idaho might have a whole different perspective.
And without that, we'd be much more shallow and much less able to shape good legislation. I remember a bill that came up that large utilities companies brought up concerning dig line and some issues with how they trenched and what their responsibilities were. And boy, that was right in my industry. And I recognize, we've done, over the years, 10,000 homes. And so I run into dig line every day, in multiple locations every day. And I had very strong opinions on that bill. I knew that they had left out things that would affect my side of the industry. And so I was able to dig in and talk to my legislators and say, I understand what they're trying to do, but there's some areas that they didn't address that's going to affect every excavator and every home builder in the state. And so from my background, I can say, let me try to add to that bill. Let me try to build with that. And then luckily, I had enough respect from other legislators that they let me take the lead. It became a good bill and we passed it.
I felt very seldom that I had to indemnify myself. It was hard to work on the budget and of the state police, and at the same, when I was in JFAC, and at the same time, I was ordering cars for them. And so there's times when you have to indemnify yourself, but that's very, very seldom in the legislature in the state of Idaho.
Because we're like every other citizen out there. If we're experiencing it, someone else is experiencing it.
A professional legislator, is more committed to the special interest, where a citizen legislature is more concerned about their constituency. I am firmly committed that that's true because I've watched it in other states. A professional legislator is not concerned about balancing the constituent and the other. He's only concerned about being re-elected.
I remember reading 4,000 pages of legislation in a session, 4,000 pages. So you're overloaded. So you're looking for efficiency. That's why lobbyists can be so effective, because they're very efficient in bringing you information. Well, if they've got one side of an issue covered and the other side of the issue isn't, it's tough to fill in the other side. And so you need to try to find a legislator, obviously, who's in that industry, very efficient, very informative and helpful. If not, you got to go looking, because you don't have a lot of time to fill in those gaps. You have to use your best judgment, try to do a little research. A lot of us will call our constituents, I know you're in this industry, I don't understand this industry, here's this bill, how does it affect you? And then those are data points. If we don't have the background, you've got to find somebody that has the background. I remember I used to tease people, I must have developed a great personality because all of a sudden everyone's inviting me to all these parties and buying my lunches, you know? Well, that's the environment.
When you're serving in the legislature, everyone loves you.
I didn't want to go down that path. I never bought in that those lobbyists were really my friends. They're nice people. But the truth is, as soon as I didn't run for re-election, they disappeared. I was no longer invited to their parties. So it wasn't about a real relationship, it was about a professional relationship.
It's absolutely true, and you see them on the street, and all of a sudden it's like, no, you look familiar, but I'm not quite sure who you are. And just a little bit ago, they were presenting you with a plaque saying, Mr. Wonderful, you know.
This fund does have
Oh yeah, well there's a couple that I am concerned about. One is when it becomes specific to that individual, particularly if it's going to enrich an individual, and if it's going to disadvantage others, then that creates an enormous conflict of interest, and it can only be wrong, but it can hurt the legislature and hurt the citizens. The other one that I have concerns about is when you have large groups of people that have a homogeneous cause, and any group like that, when there's too many of them, it becomes very easy for them to have that groupthink where they tend to justify favoritism towards their industry, and it can result in some inappropriate and unfair legislation.
So sometimes you have to have enough conscience to vote, you know, on a tough issue. You know, and a committee chairman has to have enough guts to let his committee hear a piece of legislation. And it's those kind of politics, I think, that cause people to say, this guy's a scoundrel. Because, you know, something that's important to them doesn't get validity.
You don't want legislators, frankly, who are conformists because they can be led. You want those who challenge, because we're supposed to represent constituents. And there are powerful interests that are not necessarily our constituents' interests. And it takes some independence and a little bit of fortitude to ask tougher questions. That's what they're here for.